But okay, again, thank you for coming. Super excited. Just by way of introduction, hopefully you've got, if you're here, you got 2 emails, and they're both amazing. We could use both of those. And what we're going to do really today is we're focusing much more on the what of the Seder and the what of Pesach than the why. So the why is, of course, super, super, super important. But that's not what we're doing tonight. If anyone wants to stick around later and talk about that, we might be able to do that. And certainly offline we could do that. But the goal really is to lose that echo.
Hold on one second.
Hold on one sec. Is to lose that echo, and then after we lost the echo, the goal really is to get through the what really quick. And so whether we're leading a Seder, whether we're participating in a Seder, we can have, we'll be very educated as we do that. So again, everyone please buckle up. We're going to move through this as quickly as we possibly can. And any questions, please do take advantage of that chat feature. So on number 1, which is Seder order and plan, hopefully you have that. It goes like this. Number 1 is don't forget to invite guests. So there's a big piece of the Seder meal is chesed, is kindness. We actually have that in the Haggadah itself. There's a proclamation there that says that anyone who wants to join in our feast, Pesach Seder, please come do that. It's definitely within the spirit of the day to invite guests. If you're not comfortable because it might be your first Seder or something like that, then maybe you should try being a guest. But doing a Pesach Seder with other people is highly recommended. Rabbi, you got number 2.
Okay, so this is actually a real halacha, it's a real law. Is make sure your Seder table should be set before the holiday begins. The idea is the Passover Seder is obviously a very, very central ritual and observance in Jewish law. So there are really two elements here. Number 1 is make your Seder table look beautiful. It should look inviting. This is a beautiful, sacred moment where memories are made, are some of the most fundamental ideas of Jewish belief and tradition are passed down generationally. Make sure your table is set. It should be beautiful. It should look lovely. And it's critical that there's a timing component of the Seder. The Seder cannot start before what's considered halachic, the halachic evening, which is when stars are out. So that will be this Thursday. The first Seder is, the upcoming Friday night and Saturday night. I believe the earliest you can start your Seder, I want to say, is about 8:03.
I would be okay with 8:02.
8:02, I believe, something in that zone. But there's a flip to that, is you don't want to start it at 9 o'clock. Get it started on time, because the idea is that we really want to include the children to participate. 8 o'clock is late to start a dinner, and especially your Seder is going to go a few hours long, so it's going to be tough for the kids. So the idea is start on time, be punctual, make sure the kids stay up for the Seder. If we're not starting till 9:30, you've got a problem. You can't start at 7:30. So you kind of want to you want to start kind of on time. In terms of what needs to get on your Seder, we're going to talk about that in just a moment.
Okay, perfect. So number 3 is, and actually, no, I'm thinking maybe to go out of order just for a moment. You guys hopefully got the email with the Seder checklist. That's just one piece of paper. And I'm going to run down this really quickly. And I'm actually would love to get some feedback on the chat on this if I forgot something, which I'm sure I did. So it's not if I forgot, I forgot. So let me know what I forgot and bust the rabbi. That would be amazing.
Before, Rabbi, you go, can I interrupt you?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. Is that what's not on this checklist, or what might be on this checklist, but it is on this checklist, but I want to preempt you, if that's okay, is getting the right Haggadah for your Passover Seder is critical. So whether you're going to be hosting your own Seder or you're going to be participating at someone's Seder, getting the right Haggadah is really valuable. If you're not familiar, the Haggadah is the book that we're going to be using during the Seder. If you Google Haggadah, you go on Amazon to try to find a Haggadah, you're going to find 8 billion of them. Some are really good. Almost all of them are really good. I'm going to actually
Some of them are horrible.
Some of them are horrible.
Meth is too positive.
I want to recommend one. It's in its simplicity. It's what I use for my family and for my guests at my Seder. There you go. Someone's holding it up. Darren's got it, and I'm going to post the link on Amazon. This is an expensive Haggadah. It comes in at $3.99, but it's perfect. It's got a very good layout. The English translations are concise. The laws and the halachas and the instructions are perfect, and you really cannot run a Seder. That's kind of the first thing on your checklist. Get yourself a Haggadah.
Agreed. I think it's the second thing on your checklist. The main thing is to get some good wine.
That's also true.
Right? Okay. So let's rip through this really quickly, the checklist. Wine or grape juice. So wine is definitely preferred to grape juice. If a person cannot tolerate wine, then you can have grape juice. But again, by the way, it's super important, if someone is diabetic, then you really need to speak to a rabbi before the Seder, because there are things that you need to know about. There are ways to do it safely.
It's very doable.
It is critical that you do speak to a rabbi who understands halacha and diabetes. That'll be Rabbi Meth. Number 2 is make sure you have a proper cup for the 4 cups of wine. That will be a cup that holds a minimum. Make your life easy. A minimum of 4 to 5 ounces. You don't want to have a super tiny cup, but you don't want to have a big cup either, because that could be annoying. So we got a question on the chat that Rabbi Meth will address in a second. Salt water is a very, very easy recipe. Water and salt. Mix it up. We'll get to what we need that for later. Do that before the holiday begins. The Seder plate, again, you can get them on Amazon. You don't need an actual Seder plate. You can take a paper plate and put the stuff that you're going to eat on the Seder. You want to get a fancy one, knock yourself out. By the way, the Haggadah that Rabbi Meth recommended will have the chart in it of how to set up that Seder plate. A hard-boiled egg, again, super easy to make. Even I could do that. The shiurim size charts. Right, Meth, you got one of those.
Yes, here. And this will be helpful for you, because as we're going to see later on in the Seder, there are a lot of ritual foods that we eat, and you actually have to eat a specific amount. So there are, I think this is coming up on my screen backwards.
But everyone's got an email.
Oh, you'll get it. And this is very helpful. You can use these little charts to help you measure out the foods that you'll need, the matzah, the maror, and the things that you have. These are always very helpful to have. I will say, if you print it out and it's paper and you put the maror on it, it's going to get mushy real quick. I usually try to laminate it, but if not, you'll be fine.
Or you could probably print out two. And that would work also. Okay, next is the shank bone. That's me for the Seder plate. Many people get a meat shank bone. If you don't know a good kosher butcher, it's going to be impossible to find. What we use in my house is just a chicken wing.
That's fine.
They're easy to find. And then that's going to be grilled or whatever. You'll figure it out when you get that Haggadah. Charoset. I love charoset. Many people don't. It doesn't matter. You still got to get some or make some. Also, super easy recipes online. If the recipe calls for more than like 80 seconds worth of work, someone's overthinking it. It's nuts, it's wine, and that's pretty much it. So it's pretty straightforward. Maror, what are we using for maror? You can use horseradish if you're a tough guy. That means fresh horseradish that you're going to grate, etc. If you want, you can use romaine leaves. Easier on every part of your digestive system and on your tongue as well. Either one of those is totally okay. Matzah. Rabbi, I want to talk about matzah quickly, what the matzah is needed for the Pesach. Okay,
so you're going to need a whole chunk of matzah. You really have to get for the Seder. You have to you can't just get the regular, matzah, machine matzah. You got to get shmura matzah, which, it could be, there is such a thing as machine shmura matzah, but shmura matzah means it's kind of a higher standard of kosherness. I'm going to guess that they still have available at Smith's. Costco, the hand matzah is almost always shmura matzah. Costco had them for sale. Rabbi, do you know if they still have them?
No, but I will know tomorrow when I go to get them.
So that would be where I would go. If you don't have, get it at Costco, the one here on Charleston. They had them earlier. It's not the cheapest thing in the world. It's about, I think it was $17 for one of those 1-pound boxes. And you just have to kind of figure out how much you're going to need.
Right, but again, using that chart, you can know. And that's to be clear, that is just for the Seder.
Just for the Seder.
For the rest of the Pesach, as any
matzah is perfect for the rest of the Seder.
Passover is that. And yes, It is at Albertsons more. That's pretty typical. Okay.
Can I jump in? There was a comment
Yeah.
on the chat. Can the Kiddush cup be used for all cups of wine? I'm curious, Rabbi, do you know the answer to that? It's a trick question.
Can the Kiddush cup be used?
The answer is yes. I'll tell you the answer. The answer is yes, but this is going to be Chinese for 1 second. Rabbi Davidowitz, you might be aware of the Beer Halacha quotes the Prima Gadim, who says there might be a possibility that there's a chumrah to use 4 separate cups. But the Mishnah Berurah is very clear that you can use one cup. So anyway, the short answer is a definitive, absolute, 100% yes.
But if you go to the Meth house, they'll give you 4 cups.
But if you want to be extra religious, there is a non-halachic opinion that says you need 4 separate cups, but that is not normative halacha on any level.
Okay, next, matzah cover. Again, get one on Amazon. You can make one at home.
Yeah.
Do whatever you want. You just Google it. You'll see some nice ones. You'll figure it out. Afikomen bag. There is a mitzvah afikomen, which we'll talk about later, which is the part of the matzah that we crack off. And then if we have kids around, sometimes they'll hide it, etc. You want to make sure you have some kind of bag for that. You can use a Ziploc. It's fine. Just anything which is going to keep the matzah clean. Doesn't have to. It's not a ritual bag. It's a practical bag. Haggadahs, we discussed that already. Kittel, this is interesting. Many people have a custom, if you own a kittel, to wear it. If you don't own a kittel, call me later, we'll talk about it. Menu, makes all your food should obviously be kosher for Passover. There is time-honored tradition, law, that says no barbecued meat at the Seder. So if you're going to have like a brisket or something, it's going to have to be braised.
I don't know what the word is, but you have to cook it in liquid.
Right, that's
what braising is?
Yeah, exactly.
They're going to have to send me back to culinary school.
Exactly. Last thing is...
By the way, if I could just interrupt or add, that applies to chicken as well. So any chicken or beef, if you're going to be eating that, as part of your meal at the Seder, again, it's got to be cooked in a liquid. You cannot roast it, even pan roasting. It's got to be a little bit of liquid in there. And
now we promise not to tell you any whys, but I got to say one why for this really quickly. The why is because we don't want this to look like the Paschal lamb, which was always roasted. Right. We want to make a distinction. We are not eating the Paschal lamb. We don't have the temple today in Jerusalem, therefore we don't have sacrifices, and that's why we're not going to cook it or roast it in the same way that we would the Paschal lamb. Sounds good? If you have any questions, too bad you can't ask them, you're muted. But you can put them on the chat, don't forget. Okay, let's keep rolling. So number 3 on the sheet is back to the Seder order and plan, is light Shabbat or holiday candles. So don't forget, specifically because this year, the first night Seder falls out on Friday, even though it's the holiday of Pesach, which means typically we could light fire from a pre-existing flame, it's also Shabbat. We always are going to follow the more stringent of the two, and therefore you're going to light your candles for the holiday and for Shabbat at the time, which is in the email, which if you're on this chat, you probably get.
I think it's about 6, I'm going to guess it's in the 6:55 zone.
Something like that.
You're going, so again, next week, Friday, so you want to do it before then. So Friday night before 6:55. The Saturday night one, it's going to be after that 8:02 zone. And as Rabbi pointed out, for the Saturday night one, you're going to want to be using the flame from a pre-existing candle.
Correct. Why don't you do 3, 4?
I lost the
You do 4,
place.
5, and 6.
Okay, table should be set beautifully as possible. We discussed 3 matzahs stacked. Okay, so the Seder plate, which let's go to the Seder plate, and we'll get to the matzahs. You want your saltwater, egg, roasted bone, charoset, karpas. Some people add something called chazeret. I would encourage you, is if you get a Seder plate, they'll show you how to put it on that plate. Or in any Haggadah, it's usually one of the first 3 pages, they're going to have a little diagram of how to put and position your Seder plate. Now, in addition to your Seder plate, you're going to need 3 matzahs. We talked about it should be shmura matzah. Those matzahs should be complete. In other words, if it's a matzah that's, a mouse took a bite out of it, there's a crack and there's a piece missing, you want to avoid that. You want them to be complete matzahs, and you want to have 3 of them. What ends up usually being really clunky is how do you do the Seder plate and the matzahs and not break your matzahs? So some Seder plates will actually be like rigid, where they're like almost like little shelf compartments. I was actually talking to Rabbi today about how to build one. I might build my own. But regardless, if you're going to use a regular plate, usually what people do is they'll put their matzahs kind of underneath that plate, and that's fine. Just be careful not to break that matzah. Okay, that sounds good. And then you have 3 matzahs, even though usually on Shabbat it's only 2 loaves.
for the Pesach Seder, and you'll see why as we go through. It's going to be 3. Okay, we just talked about setting up for the Seder, and we're going to get now to is now the beginning of the Seder. So the first piece of the Seder is Kaddish. Kaddish sounds a lot like Kiddush for a good reason. It's Kiddush. Each participant should have their own cup of wine or grape juice. If you're a kid, by the way, definitely you want to give them grape juice. I did make the mistake once of having, in recent history, one of my little guys was really insistent on having like half wine, half grape juice because like he thought he was getting older. He basically sat out the second half of the Seder feeling nasty. So never again. Say definitely grape juice is the way to go if you're little, and
or if you're an alcoholic, which is a real consideration.
Correct. If you're not yet an alcoholic after 4 cups, we'll get you on that path. Not to be nervous. So everyone gets their own cup because again, although it's Kiddush, which one person typically recites, it is also the first of the 4 cups. And I'll get to number 2 really quickly, is the custom is that someone else should pour the wine for your cup. A king does not fill his own glass. We're going to have many things over the night which are going to make us feel like royalty and also remind us of slavery. It is the greatest dichotomy of the Seder. We're eating matzah, which is the bread of affliction. No one would ever choose matzah over a good like sourdough or something like that, but we're also drinking wine, and we're drinking it like kings, and therefore there's a custom that you don't fill your own glass, and therefore if you're at a Seder with many people, you'll find very often each person is filling the glass for the person next door. Rabbi, you got this.
Okay, so follow the Haggadah for the text of the Kiddush. Note the differences for each night, Shabbos and Yak Nahaz. You want to know, what's Yak Nahaz? I'm going to answer that question for you. So this year's Seder, both the Friday night Seder and the Saturday night Seder are a little bit atypical for 2 reasons. The Friday night Kiddush is both the holiday, the Pesach text of the Kiddush, but it's also Shabbat. So the first Seder, it's going to be a combo. We're going to do both Shabbat and the as well as the Kiddush for Pesach. Follow your Haggadah and just make sure you add in the appropriate insertions. For the second Seder, it's a little bit more nuanced, but again, follow the instructions. Here's where having a good Haggadah will really, really be helpful. And again, I can't emphasize that art scroll one that I posted on the chat is really simple.
Are you sure it's a good Haggadah?
It's a great Haggadah. It's not just good. And it'll really show you what to do, but just keep in mind, for the second night, so that's the Saturday night Kiddush, you're doing 2 things at once. You're going to be doing the Kiddush for Pesach, but it's also Havdalah because, again, it's Saturday night. And if you look on the sheet, it says Yak Nahaz. If you want to know what Yak Nahaz is one of the great acronyms in Judaism found in the Talmud, which it's an acronym of what the order of the Kiddush is. Yayin Kiddush Ner Havdalah Zman. If you're not familiar with that, don't worry. Just follow the text for your Haggadah, keeping in mind the second Seder is also Saturday night. There's a minimum drink. You got to drink roughly 2 ounces. I'll cover number 5 is don't forget to lean. This is going to be an important law throughout the whole Seder is anything that you're going to be eating, do yourself a favor, lean a little bit to your left, kind of like this. Why do we lean? As Rabbi pointed out, that was the sign, that was the way nobility, royalty used to eat back in the good old days. And as Rabbi pointed out, the dichotomy of the Passover Seder is we are both remembering the slavery, but we're also commemorating our freedom in that we are a Mamlachas Kohanim, the Gai Kadosh, we're a kingly nation, and it was the tradition and custom of royalty to lean. If I could just add, who recites the Kiddush? Who's going to be the person that recites the Kiddush? There are different traditions on how to do it. If you'd like, for simplicity, the person who's leading the Seder could be the only one to actually recite the Kiddush, and all the participants could just say Amen. But as Rabbi pointed out, everyone ideally should have their own glass. If others kind of want to, in an undertone, recite together with the person leading the Seder, you could do that too. In some households, different people will take turns. There are different traditions, different ways of doing that. Lefty leans to the right or left to the left. Absolutely.
Okay, Perfect. Moving right along. So we did Kiddush. Our first step is complete. And now we're doing Urchatz, which is washing the hands. This is very interesting. We wash our hands just as we would wash our hands for bread. So that's with the cup, twice on each hand. The only thing that's different here is that there is no blessing. So we're not eating bread yet. We'll be eating some bread later. We're not eating bread yet, and because of that, we're washing without a blessing. Then brings us to the karpas, which is the non-bitter vegetable. If you don't like bitter vegetables, this is your time to shine. You can have, people do different things. People have potatoes, they have celery. We always use potatoes. And I think the reason is because the custom comes from Europe, where that's probably the only vegetable they had. That was considered like health food, white potatoes back then. Because I think any food was considered health food. So that's that. How about you? What do you use?
So we have, this is a funny story, is that also we use the potato, but apparently my mother's father of blessed memory used parsley. So my dad of blessed memory, for shalom bayis, so that there be love and harmony in the household, we would do both. We would do a little sprig of parsley together with a little piece of potato. But everyone has different traditions. The one thing I would just point out is don't use romaine lettuce. Now, whatever's going to be used for your maror, you cannot use as karpas. But other than that, it's really just a small piece of anything that's bracha is borei pri ha'adama. That's a vegetable, and you're fine.
Okay, so one of the great challenges this evening is keeping Rabbi Meth and I on topic, which is almost impossible between both our personalities. But I just want to throw out really quickly, there was a rabbi, I think his name was Rabbi Teitz, in Elizabeth, New Jersey, who was famous for using a banana for karpas. And the reason is because he wanted to dry, in America, a banana is considered a fruit. Not scientifically necessarily, but the way that...
If I were to take a survey, is a banana fruit?
In halacha, banana is a vegetable, and he wanted to get that point across. So he would have a banana for karpas. That's definitely could win you a free beer in a bar somewhere. If what did Rabbi Teitz have for his karpas? But don't have that beer in a bar on Passover, because beer is going to be chametz. It comes from wheat.
Mark wants to know, when I was at Rabbi Meth's Seder, there was no talking during washing. The answer is, it's a great question, it's a preferred, it's not an absolute necessity, but it's a preference, very much like, and just to hit on without getting too far afield, the laws of washing in this case for the karpas are exactly the same as the laws of washing on bread. And the tradition is when you do the tilat yadayim for bread, ideally you should make as little interruption between washing of the hands and eating of the bread. So too over here when it comes to the karpas, we wash our hand and try to avoid talking before unnecessary talking. Again, if you have to ask, hey, something relevant to the Seder, you can talk, it's okay. But the idea is to minimize interruption, and that's why we were all silent.
Perfect. Next, so karpas, now we're going to take that karpas, that vegetable, whether it's banana or it's parsley, whatever it is, we're going to dip that into the salt water that we prepared ideally before the holiday and make a blessing on the vegetable as found in the Haggadah, is because we're eating, anytime we eat anything, we're always going to make that blessing. Have in mind that blessing should also cover the bitter herbs that we'll be eating later. This is if you want to be a very high-end religious person, then you keep this in mind too, is because we are going to be eating more vegetables later on in the meal. So have in mind when you make the blessing of Borei Pri Adama on that it should go on both. One small piece per person. If someone wants to take two pieces, I would not start a fight over it, but the custom is that's only a little bit per person.
If I could just hop in real quick, again, Rabbi said we're not talking about the whys, we're doing the whats. This is one thing where it is important to know the whys. Why are we doing karpas? And it's because it's kind of part of the what. The reason why we do this karpas, famously, the Talmud says, so that the children will ask. Try to pique the curiosity of the children, which, if you've ever heard that, it's always an unsatisfying answer. Like, okay, so the children, but why do we do it? And the answer is that we want to show the children we're starting the meal, right? Their kids are used to having a big festive meal, great, but we're only taking one little bite, and then we're saying, hold on a second, we need to put everything on pause. We're going to take one little bite, but now we need to take a pause so we can do the rest of the Seder and talk about the story of the Exodus.
Perfect. One more why while we're not doing why is like this, is, again, the dichotomy is on the one hand, we're dipping. That's the way a king eats. A pauper doesn't have anything to dip his anything into, right? But a king is always dipping something, and there's always a sauce it goes along with the main, but we're dipping into salt water. Salt water is reminiscent of tears, the tears that the Jewish people shed during their slavery. So again, super interesting. Continuing with Yachatz, go.
So after Karpos, we get to Yachatz, which goes like this. Remember, we had our 3 matzahs in front of us. You're going to pull out the middle matzah. You're going to pull out the middle matzah, and you're going to go ahead and you're going to crack it in half. What happens every single year in every Jewish home is you split it exactly down the middle. Now, that's not what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to split it so that there's a bigger portion and a smaller portion. It never works that way, and then it always becomes a joke. That doesn't work out. But what you do is you split it. You return the smaller portion back in between the 2 whole matzahs. You take that bigger portion, and you remember that afikomen bag that Rabbi was talking about, is you're going to take that bigger portion and put it inside the afikomen bag. What do you do with the afikomen bag? So the Mishnah Berurah actually says you should stick it under your tablecloth. That's what he says. Different people do different things. That's what the halacha seems to say you should do. The idea is you hide it. You're going to go ahead and put it away for a later part of the Seder.
Okay, and then again, just again, playing dichotomies is that it's a poor man's bread. What a poor man will do is he's not going to eat all of his bread right now. He's going to save some of his bread for later. Okay, so number 2, some have the custom to place afikomen bag on their shoulder. That's what my dad and who still does, and my grandpa always used to do. And the idea is this is again reminiscent of the fact that when the Jewish people left Egypt, the matzah baked in the sun on their shoulders, which before I moved to Vegas and I was East Coast person, I was like, yeah, right, come on. Right? Now you're going to tell me the sea split too? And now, once I believe that I've seen the matzah bake on people's shoulders, I totally get that. I'll believe the sea as well. So that's that. Kids should be encouraged to steal the afikomen to keep them excited. There's different opinions about this. This is just my opinion. Be sure that the kids return the afikomen later. Ideally, we should find out where it is before they fall asleep.
Just as the historical thing, the stealing the afikomen thing is not really based on any kind of. That's an American tradition that came up recently. Different people have different things. We're encouraging kids to steal. Good idea, bad idea. The source is a good place. The idea is it's an interesting way of keeping the kids involved. That idea is definitely in line with Jewish thinking.
Okay, perfect. Magid, telling the story. So we've got a bunch of the rituals done already, and now we're getting into the meat of the Seder, which is not meat, but it is a story. There's 2 primary points, and this is actually my favorite little intro to the Haggadah, is there's 2 primary points when we're doing the Haggadah. And if you understand this, you'll see how the author of the Haggadah consistently toggles between these 2 points. Part number 1 is understanding the history of Yetzias Mitzrayim, of the Exodus of Egypt. Part number 2 is thanking God for that Exodus. So we'll talk about some history, and then we'll say some psalms of thank you. And then we'll talk about some more history, and we'll say more psalms of thank you. Number 2, Rabbi, you got it.
Okay, number 2, and I'm going to combine 2 and 3 into one point, which is make sure that everyone understands the story of the Haggadah, read it in English. You are the teacher, make sure that everyone stays engaged. I really want to underline, highlight, underscore these 2 points. This is, in a certain sense, the most important, in many ways, the most important part of the entire Seder. It's actually one of the mitzvahs, it's actually a Torah commandment to tell over the story. It needs to be engaging, it needs to be meaningful, and it needs to be understood. If you're not so comfortable with Hebrew, do not be ashamed to recite it in English. Recite it in English. Make sure it's meaningful, make sure you understand it, make sure your participants understand it. People have a lot of different preconceived notions of what this part of the Seder ought to be. To my mind, the most important thing is being mindful and present. That when you're reciting the Haggadah, you're paying attention to what we're reciting. And as Rabbi pointed out, I'm understanding the story. I'm thanking God. Be present. So whether that means you recite the Haggadah quickly, slowly, a little bit of both, isn't really relevant. The point is, you're the teacher, make sure everyone is engaged, and make sure everyone is present as we tell over this story. This is where the beauty and the magic of the Seder really is.
Okay, I want to jump in and say that for me, the hardest part of the Seder is, and this is going to get really, I'm skipping to number 5, but we'll come back, is to keep this part moving.
Yes.
Because it is so rich. There is so much history and so much to talk about, and the kids wanted to participate. but you can very easily get bogged down in the first 10% and then burn out your crowd. So you've got, or yourself out. So you've got to really keep moving. Do whatever you can to make it interesting. People, you can find on Amazon little games that people play with the plagues and stuff like that. A friend of mine actually suggested to me a bunch of years back, and I did it, is I got a puppet on Amazon. It cost me like, I don't know, $30, like a Melissa and Doug puppet. And I have him next to me. He tells part of the story, which the little kids really, really appreciate because they really can't pay much attention. I want them to have more memories. The big kids don't really care. They're laughing at me. They're either laughing with me or at me. It doesn't really matter. But the little kids really appreciate that. Do whatever you have to do to keep everybody's attention. But the main thing is to keep things moving because it's so difficult, to really do that. There is an old custom that when you say the 10 plagues, which is during the Magid, is to pour a little bit of the wine out of your cup onto your plate, not onto the floor, onto your plate. It is a good idea, by the way, to keep your Kiddush cup on a plate. People don't always think of that in advance because it will be spilling all over the place. So keep it on a plate. And that's the idea there is that even though we're happy that the Jewish people won and the Egyptians lost, we are not excited about the fact that there were losers in the story as well. We want to take away a little bit of our simcha, a little bit of our joy by throwing some of that wine away until our cup is not fully full. Rabbi, you got this.
Okay, give out candy and treats. Okay, we've talked about that idea before. It's just different ways of keeping everyone engaged. At the end of Magid is when we again, we're going to say Kiddush 4 times at the Haggadah. The end of Magid is the second cup of wine. We recite the bracha, we drink it, and again, remember to lean. That's when we get to the second cup of wine. I want to again, I think Rabbi's point of Magid is going to be the bulk of your Seder. Okay? Saying over the Haggadah, that's going to be the bulk of the time. Keep it paced. You want to be able to, if there's some interesting, powerful points and you want to dwell on that, that's a great idea, but keep things moving at the appropriate pace for your crowd. When we finish with that, after Magid, and again, it could take a significant amount of time. When we're finished with Magid, now we're on to the next step, Rachza. It's exactly like Orchatz. We're going to wash our hands. This is it's just like you were washing for bread. Here we do add the bracha. We do make the bracha of Netilat Yadayim. And after we do that, again, to Mark's point before, we don't go ahead. You should try to avoid talking. And the truth of the matter is, I'm going to go out of order here if I can, Rabbi.
Go.
We're going to now, on the next page, we're going to cover a couple of things. Motzi, matzah, morer, korech. In my family, the tradition is I try to avoid talking from the time we wash our hands till after we finish korech. So I do motzi, matzah, morer, korech, and really try to avoid talking.
Do you hold your breath or you?
No, you're allowed to breathe. That's okay. Thank you, Rabbi. But I try to avoid talking. I will just provide basic instructions, and I'll let everyone know that I don't talk. If you end up talking, don't worry, you didn't blow it. You're still kosher.
Let me just throw something, just a quick interruption. Is certainly if you're talking about what you're doing, that's 100%.
100% okay.
Okay, and recommended. You have a question, is this the right amount? Whatever it is, what do I do next? I lost the page of my Haggadah. That's not what we're discussing, right? We're not discussing idle chatter and talking about other things besides the mitzvah that you're doing.
I'll take us to motzi matzah. After you've washed your hands and you're not talking or you are talking or whatever it is that you're doing, now is the time to eat the motzi, as we do motzi matzah. Really, on a regular Shabbat or a regular holiday, you wash your hands, you make a motzi, and you eat your bread. On Passover, you're really doing 2 things. There's a mitzvah to have a festive meal, and like any other holiday or Shabbat, and a festive meal is going to include 2 loaves of bread, lechem mishnah. That's why we're going to have, again, if you keep in mind, if you're keeping track, we've got 2.5 matzahs right now. We've got 2.5 matzahs at the moment. So you pick up both 2.5, the top, the middle one that's broken, and the bottom one. You're going to pick them all up, make the bracha of hamotzi lechem min haaretz. That's the bracha that we make on bread. We are then going to drop the bottom. You don't have to drop it, let go of it. You put down the bottom matzah. You're now going to have in your hand only the top 1.5 matzahs, and you're going to make a special prayer on the matzah. al achilas matzah. There's a special mitzvah of specifically eating matzah. Now, someone asked in the chat earlier, isn't it interesting we're making a bracha on a broken piece of matzah? And the answer is yes. The bracha, the prayer on the meal, that's going to have 2 full complete matzahs. But when it comes to the mitzvah of matzah, as Rabbi pointed out earlier, matzah is lechem oni. It's a poor man's bread. So that's why we're going to have that broken piece of matzah. You're then going to go ahead after the motzi matzah. You're going to make sure as you have your little sheet, how much matzah you're going to have. You should really have, if you can, it's never going to work, but if you can, have some matzah from both the top and that middle broken one. Everyone should get a little piece of that, but make sure you have the appropriate measurement. Use one of these little handy-dandy sheets, and you'll be fine. And don't forget to lean.
Okay, here's what happens. If you forget to lean, not only are you a bad person, just making sure everyone's paying attention. Okay, not only are you a bad person, but you actually have to eat it again. So don't forget to lean. That's why it says here, don't forget to lean. Just don't forget to lean. No one needs to see you eating matzah twice, son. It's not going to be fun. Once we're done the matzah, we're going to go to the marar. And the marar is the bitter herbs. We talked about that. Horseradish or romaine lettuce. If you don't know how to check romaine lettuce for bugs, give me a call. We'll talk about it. And it's actually quite easy because you don't want any bugs. There's no mitzvah to do that. Dip the marar in charoset. Charoset sweet. Sounds like a dichotomy, right? We got some bitter, we got some sweet. Shake it off, and guess what you do? Mark, you lean, right? Just kidding. Don't lean.
That's the one exception, the maror, which is a reminder again of the slavery and the bitter times. So again, the leaning, the whole idea of the leaning is it's a remembrance of the slavery, the leaning is a remembrance of our royalty. The bitter herbs is a reminder of our slavery. So that's where we don't lean.
All right, now the best part is the sandwich.
Oh, the best part is the sandwich. There's you'll note in your Haggadah, according to the great sage Hillel, back in the good old days, Bizman Shebeis HaMikdash HaYakayim, during the times of the temple, he would have his matzah, his marar, and his karban pesach, his paschal lamb, and eat it all together as one. That must have been really, really cool. We don't have the karban pesach anymore, so there's certainly no requirement to do that anymore. And rather what we do is, as a remembrance of Hillel's tradition, we eat our matzah together with the marar in remembrance to what Hillel did back in the times of the temple. So you're going to go ahead with that third matzah, which is that third matzah was on the bottom. You're going to break it and kind of make a sandwich out of it. It's going to be the clunkiest sandwich you've ever had in your life, because the second you take a bite of it, it cracks all over the place. You're going to make a mess.
It's not unlike a taco.
It's like a taco, exactly. All right, which I still haven't mastered after all these years. No. It gets everywhere. You're going to eat your korach sandwich. You want to put charoset in there as well. This one you should lean in, and there's a special, you check in your Haggadah, there's a special prayer that's recited as well. Perfect.
Shulchan Aruch, everyone's favorite part of the Seder is you finally get to eat. So if you started your Seder when I said you would, 8:02, as opposed to Meth wanted you to start at 8:03. But if you start at 8:02, you're probably going to get up to this. It could be a solid 2 hours.
Probably. A
solid 2 hours. If you're moving fast and you know what you're doing, because there's a lot to cover, a lot of the rituals we talked about in the beginning, and then the whole story, and then eating the matzah and everyone standing up and sitting down, etc. It's going to take a while. So it always is good not to be starving before the Pesach Seder starts. Again, you can't eat any matzah and you can't eat any bread before the Seder, but eating something before the Seder is a good idea. Have a meal, enjoy, I don't know, whatever you want to make. Chicken soup always works.
Can't go wrong in Judaism with
chicken soup. Exactly.
Little matzo balls in there also.
You could do that.
Very traditional.
You could do that if you'd like. But it's a normal meal, whatever you would have at a holiday meal. You can drink whatever you want at that meal, again, assuming it's kosher for Passover. And you want some more wine, drink some more wine, whatever it is. And but the one thing is like this. You've got to save room for the afikomen. The afikomen is that last piece of matzah that we get to eat for the evening. And in fact, it's the last food that we're going to consume this evening. So afikomen will be, Rabbi, you got the chart right there. It's a significant amount of matzah, so you don't want to be stuffed. You want to be able to make sure that you can take that down.
The idea of the afikomen is, if you recall, back in the times when they actually did the Karban Pesach, when we had the Paschal Lamb, the Karban Pesach was eaten al hasova. You would eat it as, when you were already full. Again, like that idea of regal, being royalty. You didn't have to wolf down, on the run. We eat, we're full, we're just eating because, we got plenty of food, we're going to eat anyway. And the afikomen is a remembrance of the Karban Pesach. That's why we eat it at the way in. Again, as Rabbi pointed out, get yourself one of these charts. Rabbi, should you lean with the afikomen?
I think you should lean. I think it's a good idea. Because again, no one needs to see Rabbi Meth eating it twice, right? So definitely need to lean. Now we get to Birkat HaMazon, pretty similar to every Birkat HaMazon we'd always do on Shabbat, holiday, weekday, except for there are special insertions, which will be found in that Haggadah. And then you're doing that with the third cup. We didn't really discuss the second cup.
Yeah, we did.
We did?
The end of Magid.
I wasn't paying attention.
We're going to have to do this whole webinar over again, folks, because Rabbi wasn't paying attention.
No, but I was leaning, so it's fine. So we do that third cup. So pretend this is full of wine. We say the whole Birkat HaMazon while we're holding that cup, and then we make the blessing, and we drink it while leaning. Whoever put that into caps, great idea. After Birkat HaMazon, we fill Elijah's cup to remind us that we're waiting for one more redemption. Open the front door for a minute to show that tonight we trust God to protect us, not the locks on our door.
There are a lot of different traditions what you do with the wine or grape juice that you've put in the Kos Shel Eliyahu, in Elijah's cup. Follow whatever tradition you have. Some people, I know my in-laws, they just pour that cup and they just kind of leave it there. My dad, of blessed memory, would take the wine from that cup and use it to then fill up the fourth cup, which we're going to get to in just a moment. Rabbi, what do you guys do in your house?
My name is Eliyahu, and by that time I'm kind of thirsty. Again, I'm just seeing to make sure everyone's paying attention. No, we don't have it. We actually just usually put it away after the meal.
Put it away. I think it's what most people do.
Yeah.
Okay, that takes us to Hallel. If I could just add, or a little, my opinion, in my family, in our house, Hallel, which is all the way at the end, it's going to be late at night already. This, in my opinion, is, at least in our family Seder, is the highlight of the whole Seder. You've just told over the story. You've recounted the history. You've shared some of the messages. You've had your meal, and you're already 3 cups of wine into the Seder. So you've got a little bit of action going on. And then you sing the Hallel. This is the most beautiful of Hallels. It's called the Hallel Hagadol. If you're familiar with Hallel that we recite in Shul during holidays and happy occasions, this is an even longer version of that. We add in a few other prayers. It's just such a moving, in my opinion, as Rabbi said, we're telling over the story, but we're also singing the thanks and thanksgiving to God. Hallel is really where it's to be found. It's a very, very powerful, potentially a very powerful part of the Seder. So keep that in mind.
But when doing that, don't forget that you're holding a cup of wine. When you finish the Hallel, you make the blessing again on the wine, and you don't forget to lean. You drink that cup while leaning. By the way, just a word to the wise. I talked about the idea of having a plate under your cup. That's super helpful when you're trying to drink a glass of wine, which is usually red, and you're drinking that sideways. Having that cup will keep your shirt clean.
And an extra, I always keep a couple paper towels and napkins with me. I always drink with a paper towel over there. Otherwise you nail your shirt and your kittel.
Yeah, no one needs to see that. Okay, finally is Nirtza, the final songs. Everyone's heard of the Chagadia. My Meth's actually going to perform it for us as soon as the Zoom is over. And that's a great time. Again, have a good time with that. And really at that point, the Seder is really done. You've said these songs. You've done it 100% right. And is red or white wine preferred? I think we prefer red wine.
Red wine is preferred. However, if you prefer white wine, the Mishnah Berurah and the Halacha is go with the white wine. But red wine is preferred for 2 reasons, 2 halachic reasons why red wine is preferred. It's a zeicher ladam, it's a remembrance of the blood, all the blood of the Jewish people that were spilled, as well as in halacha, halacha tends to view red wine as being of a higher level of quality. Therefore, you should go with the red wine. But again, do with what works with you. Like if you like white wine, if you like grape juice, don't kill yourself. The idea of the whole Seder is it should be enjoyable. It should be. If you don't like wine, if don't stick with what works. Stick with what will keep you engaged and to make it a good, pleasant experience.
Okay, perfect. I think we're done. Congratulations.
You've all done it.
No, we haven't done it yet. But if you do, anyone here does want to follow up with my Meth, myself, or your other favorite co-rabbi, please do. I'm actually going to unmute